Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Catheta webinar. We're coming to you live on April 23rd. For any NLC webinar first-timers who maybe don't know, Catheta means learning in Creek. Today, you're going to be learning about how to hire the right people for your business in Indian Country from your instructor, Russ Siegel. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're all really excited that you could join us for today's webinar. If you could follow along as I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law displayed here. If you could just remember that the webinar presentation materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. All right, before we get started, I want to make sure you know how the environment works here on Adobe Connect and some of the features available to you during this webinar. So if you look at the top of your screen, you'll see an icon of a hand with a plus sign. If you click on that icon, you could either signal that you are raising your hand, that you agree, that you disagree. You could show some applause, show laughter, and you could even signal special requests like asking the instructor to speak louder, maybe slow down, please. Now your screen should look similar to this graphic. To the bottom left, you'll see a pod that says Files. Here you'll find any handouts or appendix items included in today's presentation. Feel free to download a copy for yourself. Just hover over the item you want to download with your mouse and then click that arrow that points downwards to download and save it onto your device. Russ is given permission for his presentation to be available for download. That can be accessed right there in the Files pod. The next pod over to the right is labeled Web Links. This is where you'll find our survey about today's webinar, along with the link to receive our weekly newsletter. You can connect with the Native Learning Center on LinkedIn. Actually, Russ's LinkedIn is linked there as well if you want to connect with him. And then all the way over to the right, we have the chat pod available. So this is how you'll communicate with the instructor as well as me or the NLC staff. So if you have any questions during the presentation, we welcome you to send those in. Just use that chat box. You can type your message in the space that says type here and hit enter or click that up arrow icon button to submit. We do encourage class participation, so feel free to write in those questions or write in those comments. If you have any tech support issues, you can submit that there as well. Know that most of them can be solved by just leaving and then re-entering the meeting room. All right, guys, let's all get that chat box going together. If you would please type in your name, where you're joining us from, maybe your tribal affiliation, and your work or your role that you do in Indian Country. Also, just something important to note, if anyone is viewing today's webinar as a group, maybe you're sitting with your colleagues, just please make sure to email me. I'm going to put my email into the chat box right now. We need accurate registration data for our records. And with that, we could also make sure that we're able to send a completion certificate to everybody who attends. All right, guys. With that, it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's webinar instructor, Russ Siegel. And Russ, I'm going to hand it off to you now.
Thank you, Brooke. Welcome, everybody. We're going to spend a pretty action-packed hour and a half together today. I've got a lot of information to throw your way. This is going to be, as almost all of my webinars are, it's very content-rich. So I do encourage you, go ahead and look over there on the bottom left of your screen. Go ahead and download those two files. It's actually probably more important for you to download the handouts, which is the number 2 file, because that's what you're going to be able to write on today. We're going to have a lot of things for you to write. Hopefully, you can fit it all in. You may need the back of the page. Again, I'm going to be giving you a lot of information today about hiring. And I have a lot of experience doing this. I've hired over 300 people, some good, some not so good, but I've learned a lot along the way. And when I say hiring, I'm not talking about just, you check the boxes and we're going to make you a job offer. There's a lot that goes into my hiring process, and I'm going to give you a little backstage tour of that today. I want you to be able to see a little bit about what goes on in my personal hiring process, because I'm a pretty particular person when it comes to hiring. I believe that it's just easier to hire the right people and get them on the bus, let them do what they need to do, rather than hiring the wrong people and having to look over their shoulder constantly for the entirety of their career, maybe even the entirety of your career. But I've been doing this for a long time, and I've worked with other small businesses. I work with nonprofit organizations to help them hire executives. We do executive searches and things like that in my personal consulting business. But if you can, for me, go ahead and jump in the chat really quickly and let me get a glimpse of, because this is a small group, I don't think we'll have trouble getting everyone represented here, but I want to make sure that I understand where you are in this journey. Let me know a little bit about your experience in hiring people. Have you done a lot of it? Are you very experienced? Have you never hired anyone before? Something in between? Have you done it, but you're not happy with the results? Just give me a little feedback there in the chat to let me know where you are in terms of how you feel about hiring and going through that entire process. I'll give you just a second to go ahead and do that. Looks like we've got some folks typing, so we'll wait just another moment. And this is really going to help me to help you, because there might be some areas where we need to spend a little bit more time. I might find that there are some areas where we can spend a little bit less time and focus on some different things. But yeah, if you're just joining us, please jump into the chat over on the right-hand side of your screen and let us know what your level of experience is with hiring. Okay, a lot of hiring experience, but never had the final say. Yes, and thank you, Jeff. We're going to talk about background checks and interviewing. Okay, so again, some interviewing experience, but not the decision maker, low to no level of experience. Okay. Let me give about 10 more seconds here. Let everybody finish typing. Okay. Most of the recruiting interviewing gave recommendations, not the final say. Okay. So yeah, and so there are a lot of similarities here, a lot of common ground. And for a long time, I did the same. I was the one who was making recommendations, but I didn't have the final say. And in fact, there were a few times, and you may have experienced this as well, where you make a recommendation to a hiring manager, supervisor, executive, someone who has the final say, and they override you. Maybe they say, I don't like that recommendation, I'm going to hire someone else. Well, there's some danger in that, because if they are overriding you, number one, they've undermined the authority that's been given you to do that investigation, to do that hiring process. But they've also, as we say in my neck of the woods, they've kind of bought a pig in a poke. In other words, you don't know what you're getting. You've done the background work. You've done the hard work to make sure this person is going to be a good hire. And I see it time and time again where the executive says, well, I really have somebody else in mind already. I'm going to hire someone else. There are all kinds of problems that are associated with that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, but if you are now the decision maker, I just want you to be aware why it is dangerous to let somebody else make all of this information available to you and then to disregard it. Just not a good thing for your organization to do. So today we're going to learn about why hiring right is so important. There's several reasons that you want to make sure you're doing this right. It is hard work. If you do it right, it gets better, it gets easier, and it gets more fun, but it is hard. The question you have to ask yourself is, would you rather do the hard work now for a little while and get the right person in that position, or would you rather do it the easy way and then have to babysit that person for years potentially? Now, organizations spend a disproportionate amount of money, time, and other resources lifting up poor performers. But how much better could we perform as organizations, as tribal organizations or entities, or as governments, if we just spent the time to put the right people in place to begin with. We're going to talk about what we're actually trying to accomplish. It may not be what you think it is, but what we're wanting to accomplish is more than just putting a warm body in a position. There are 3 critical things to consider. You're going to want to jot those down, and we're going to talk about the job description, how important that is. We'll talk about mining information. That's where the investigative work begins, mining the information from the application and the resumes, and then how to conduct an interview like a pro. Now, remember, we only have a little less than an hour and a half here. This is a workshop that we could spend an entire day on, and I've done this as a multi-day workshop too. So we're going to barely scratch the surface on a few of these things, but I want to go back to something that Brooke encouraged you to do, and that is to connect with me. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, if you connect with me through the Sequoia Fund website or email, one of the deals that I make with the Native Learning Center is that I'm going to make myself available to you. So if you call me up and say, hey, Russ, I was in your hiring webinar through the Native Learning Center, and I need your feedback on something, I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. It doesn't cost you anything to do that. We're going to talk about doing that hard investigative work, those background checks, those things that a lot of people are just afraid to do because, oh, what if somebody thinks we're checking up on them? Well, folks, they know you're checking up on them, or at least you should be. Making the offer, there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. And we're going to talk about what happens with all the people you don't select. And finally, how to become the kind of organization that attracts great candidates from the get-go, so that you're not out there scraping the bottom of the barrel for talent. You want to attract the cream of the crop, those people who have risen to the top in their fields and want to work for you and your organization. Oh, it makes hiring so much easier when that is the case. So a lot has changed in the last few years. Boy, hiring in 2019 was relatively easy compared to what it is like today. We had this little thing called the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe you remember it. Maybe you saw a news report or two about it. And it really did radically change a lot of things. COVID itself changed the way we work. It changed the way offices were laid out. It changed the way people interacted together in the workforce, in the workplace. We went through some labor shifts because of that. And those labor shifts took people back home. And they said, maybe I can do this job from home, or I can do this job as a hybrid position. I'm going to tell you in just a moment about how Sequoia Fund addressed all of that. But it changed how we think we should work and how we think work can get done. And inflation, the economy, interest rates, a lot of things changed. Well, you had officers that said, you need to get back to the office because we're paying a lot of money for this building. And if it sits empty, we're just wasting money. And we can't justify that. We can't justify selling this business and letting you, this building and letting you work from home. We need you back here so that we can justify continuing to make the payments. You also had workforces that said, we just are not the same in a team environment when we're apart. You need to come back. You also had a lot of people say, hey, boss, during COVID, I moved to a small town 300 miles away where living is cheaper and my kids can go to a safer school and I'm happier and my family's just happier and I don't want to come back. And you really didn't miss me because of my remote work. And I stayed productive. I kept turning in great work and I stayed in communication with my team. So the economy said, hey, maybe you don't need to live in this big city, in this neighborhood, near this big building, this big expensive office structure. A lot of things changed. Well, when we started coming out of the pandemic, there were some people who just thought we could flip the switch, go right back to 2019 or the first quarter of 2020 and just start hiring people and doing things the way we used to do them. And that's not the case. Nothing will ever be the same after that. And how do we know that? Well, we are still doing things differently today than we did pre-influenza pandemic in the early part of the 20th century. That pandemic changed work, the face of work. This pandemic has changed the face of work. And as hiring managers, as bosses, we've got to get used to how people view their work and how people view their life. We used to have this thing called work-life balance. We don't really have that anymore. We have life. And I think a lot of people woke up to that fact that we have a life, and wow, I've been driving an hour a day or more to commute to a place where I work, and then I leave, I go home, and I've got to put a different hat on when I leave. Well, what if I could just work from here? The first half of the day I'm still in my pajamas, but I'm very, very productive. Why do I need to go back? Yeah, and Jeff, great point. That a lot of people were paid to sit at home, so we did have a diminishing work ethic, which I'm going to invite you to come next week, where we're going to talk about a teen workforce. We're going to talk about the dynamics of a teen workforce. But I think teenagers have gotten a bad rap. I know some teenagers who are in the workforce, and boy, things might be a little bit different than we've given them credit for. Might be a whole different work ethic there going on. Now, with work ethic, this goes both ways. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Jeff. Work ethic goes both ways. There are a lot of people who equated sitting in a seat in front of a computer as working. Princeton University, about 15, 20 years ago, did a study where they found that in an average office environment, in an average 40-hour work week, we were seeing an average of about 17 hours of productivity. So we were deluding ourselves, believing that we were getting 40 hours of work out of people just because their behind was attached to a chair. And so on one hand, we had employees who acted busy when the manager walked by. Well, when they're at home and they have deliverables, it is a different work ethic. Maybe I can do this in my pajamas. Maybe I can get up and get an extra cup of coffee. Maybe I can eat lunch at a different time of the day. I don't have to go when everybody else goes. Maybe I can be like a hobbit and eat first breakfast, second breakfast, third breakfast, those kinds of things, but if I'm delivering the work, if I am producing the work, does it really matter? So now we've had this shift of what's important. Is it the results, or is it the being in the chair? And I'm seeing a lot of workplaces going back to believing that if somebody clocks in, sits in a seat, and does their thing, they're being productive. Well, they may not be as productive as if we had shifted to a different environment. So before we jump into anything else, I just want to give you a quick overview of where we are and where the Sequoia Fund journey took us in COVID. Now, how we go through the hiring process has not changed. Some of the questions that we have asked have changed. Some of the types of people we hire have changed because of the work that is being done. But during COVID, Cherokee is a sovereign nation straddling 2 counties in western North Carolina. And it is technically not a reservation. It's called the Qualla Boundary. After the removal, when Cherokee either stayed or came back to this area, they bought the land. So Cherokee owns this land. It is in trust with the BIA, but it is technically not a reservation. And so you have this boundary here, and that's technically what it's called, the Qualla Boundary. And that boundary was closed during COVID to protect people. Law enforcement sat at all of the entrances to the Qualla Boundary, and it was physically closed off. If you lived on the boundary, you had to have a good reason for leaving, and you had to have your tribal ID to get back. If you worked on the boundary but lived off the boundary, you actually had to provide some sort of proof every day that would get you across that line and back to the office. So Sequoia Fund, we're not out there hammering nails. We're not turning wrenches. We're not actually having to be on a job site. So at that time, we completely closed our office. Everybody had a laptop, or we got them a laptop. We went home. We set up communication structures. We set up meeting structures. Lo and behold, fast forward, we're all working from home. No one is in the office, and our clients don't care. Our productivity actually skyrocketed during this time. And I was at that time, I was trying to encourage people to slow down, take some time off, go for a walk, get away from your computer, back up a little bit. Um, because when you have no off switch, it's hard to regulate when you're supposed to work and when you're not. So, the way I managed people changed in that time. But after COVID, when we started to ease back into the office, I polled everybody and said, what did you like before COVID that you want to go back to? What do you never want to do again? What about COVID did you like that you want to keep? What do we want to scrap? And overwhelmingly, everybody said, we love working from home. We love working from home. And I didn't have a problem with it because um, people were working really well from home. And we have the type of environment where that can work. So we did some studying and we did a lot of research and we did a lot of work on this, and we actually came up with a hybrid schedule. And we realized that after talking with our board of directors, that a 4-day work week could be a huge recruiting tool for us. We're a nonprofit. We have to compete with tribal pay, tribal benefits, tribal vacation time. We have to compete with all of that for good talent. So what sets us apart is, well, now we work 4 days a week when the tribe works 5 days a week. Nothing was happening on Fridays anyway. So we closed on Fridays. We work Monday through Thursday. You have to be in the office on Monday and Thursday. But on Tuesday or Wednesday, and you can pick one, and not everyone does this, but you can work from home one of those days. If you work from home, you get a cell phone. It's connected to your office phone. You have to log in. We're not monitoring every little move, but if I call somebody, I want to know that they're answering the phone and that they're working. Because what really matters is that our loan clients get the money they need. They get to finish the projects they started. They get to fix up their homes. They get to buy a vehicle. They get to start a business, whatever that is that they need to do. We can help them do that from anywhere. So even if I'm traveling, I can work just as if I'm in the office. I can take phone calls and so forth. But this was an earth-shattering event that changed a lot of things, and it's still having these aftershocks that we're feeling in the workplace that people are still having to navigate. And no disrespect to nerds. Sorry. We all need nerds. We've got some nerds in our workforce. We've got nerds who contract with us, and thank goodness we do, because they handle all of our IT. But look, if you're going to hire and you need a nerd, you need a nerd. If you need a geek, you need a geek. I found out that there are differences between nerds and geeks. Geeks are the ones who say they are nerds who get things done. But we place a high value on hiring, because if we make better hiring decisions, our company, our organization is going to perform better, quicker. There are a lot of costs associated with bringing on a new employee. And if you bring on somebody who can ramp up a whole lot quicker, they're going to perform better, faster. And as a result, the organization is going to feel that. If you make a good hiring decision, it's easier to make another and another, and it gets easier every time you make a good hiring decision. It's important because if you do hiring well, you build credibility. If you make a good hiring decision, you got to think, what do other people think? What do people think? They think that I'm doing a good job putting good people on this team. It's like a good college football team that recruits. Whether you like Alabama or not, as a football program, they are a recruiting powerhouse. But yes, Jeff, great point. Less turnover equals less cost. When you have turnover, you not only have the turnover cost of having to train a new person, but you've got a lot of paperwork that goes into that transition. And a lot of people don't think about that because, oh, that's HR's job, or that's one person's job who handles our HR administration or administrivia, as you might say. But there are a lot of costs associated with that. A good hiring decision is going to reduce that turnover, both voluntary and involuntary turnover. And voluntary turnover is that somebody at some point decides this is just not a good fit, whether it's the culture fit, the workplace is energetic and they're not energetic, or the workplace is very humorous and they're not very humorous, or the other way around. Or it's an involuntary turnover where they're just not working out. We've recognized that. And we're not going to fire them, but we are going to free up their calendar for the future. By the way, if we have a bad employee, a quote unquote bad employee, someone who's less than desirable, not doing great work, don't be so quick to blame the employee. Now, if you've come into the job and you've inherited that employee, you might be tempted to blame the employee. I still would not, because somebody either knew that they were not a good fit and they hired that person anyway, or they've created an environment that has turned that employee into an unhappy person who does unhappy things. Okay. So if we are hiring right, it is a big deal because we're getting people in the organization who are going to be there for a while. Truett Cathy, who founded Chick-fil-A, told people, I don't hire for a long time. I hire for a lifetime. It's going to take me a long time to make a hiring decision about you, and that long time may be months. It may take me 5 or 6 months to make a decision about you, but I'm going to make a decision about you as if you're going to be here the rest of your life, because that's how integral that team was when they put that together. Other organizations are almost the exact opposite. We just want warm bodies, and you can see the results. They're drastically different. If you believe that hiring is a big deal and you make it a big deal, you're going to help candidates walk into a welcoming and productive environment that's going to be conducive to their happiness and their satisfaction from day one. And I have a little saying that I use a lot: happy people don't leave happy places. And as long as everybody's happy, which means everybody's productive, everybody can count on everybody else. I can count on you. You can count on me. We're a team. We're working well together. And if I'm creating an atmosphere where you can be your best self and do your best work, we're all going to be happy. And happy people don't leave happy places. But we're not very good at it. Let me go back here real quick. We're not very good at hiring. And there's a reason for that. We just don't do it enough. It's not something that we do every day. Maybe we don't have a job description, or maybe we have a poor job description, that we just don't have anything to work from. We don't know what we're looking for to begin with. We do a pretty bad job matching up candidates with jobs. Even if we have a description, sometimes we don't really understand that job description. Sometimes we fail to fully evaluate a resume or an application. We just don't do enough background work. We're looking for specifics, but we overlook information that really tells us something about the candidate. We're primarily concerned with skills. Now, I see this one all the time, that we need a programmer. We need somebody who's a good programmer, or we need somebody who's a good this or a good that, and they've got years and years of experience. Well, listen, if you own a restaurant and you have two candidates, one person has 15 years as a waiter, and he knows his way around a kitchen, he knows his way around the front of the house and how to set a table, but he's grouchy. He's got a terrible attitude. Versus someone who lights up the room. Their personality is just glowing. They're happy, they're vibrant, they're energetic, and they're willing to learn. What are you more likely to be able to teach? The technical skills of being a waiter, or how to be nice to people, how to like others, and how to get along with other people? You see, sometimes we're just hiring for skills and we forget everything else because we need that warm body. And that's going to come back to bite us in the end. Sometimes we settle for superficial and rehearsed answers, and we don't really probe for additional information. If somebody tells us something, we just take it at face value, and we really shouldn't. I'm going to tell you a little technique for getting past that. We don't document our interviews. We don't write things down. Well, we really should be. We have somebody here who's in law enforcement. If you ever interview somebody, aren't you writing everything down? Don't you want to be able to go back and say, hey, you told me this. Tell me a little bit more about that. Let's dig a little bit deeper. You want to be able to see if their story matches up today versus tomorrow versus next week. We're not good at hiring because we just don't do enough of it, and we're not prepared. If you go to the bookstore, if you can find a bookstore today, go into a bookstore and look at the business section and find books on how to get a job. There are shelves and shelves and shelves of how to interview, how to get a job, how to design your resume, how to look good on paper, how to look good in person, how to dress for success. Count those books and look at the number of books on how to hire someone. Huge gap there, which tells us that it's much easier to learn how to get a job than it is to learn how to hire, which leaves us to believe that candidates are far more prepared to get a job than we are to offer one. So what are we trying to accomplish? We have three things that we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to meet our goals. In other words, we do need that skill set. If you're going to hire a surgeon, don't you want to know that surgeon knows how to surgery or operate? Don't you want to know that they've done a residency, that they've done their internship, that they've had some skills that some other experienced professional has signed off on their skills? Yes. Next, we're looking for their goals. Is this where they want to be? And one of the things that I run into quite frequently is there's a little mismatched goal here called upward mobility. And it happens a lot with family-owned businesses. If you know anything about family-owned businesses, historically, since the dawn of time, family-owned businesses have hired family no matter how bad that family is. So you have throughout history companies that have almost been taken down or have actually been bankrupted by incompetent second and third generation ownership. But if you're trying to get a job with a family-owned company, what are your advancement opportunities? What's your advancement potential? Are you ever going to run that company? Maybe you need somebody to look you in the eye and say, we will hire you and we will take care of you and we will employ you for the rest of your life if that's what you want to do, but you will never run this company. And it's so much better to get that out on the table at the beginning so that you set those expectations, because if you have somebody who's gotten hired and they think that someday they're going to run the company, they're going to end up leaving, and they may be able to do some damage to your organization before they leave, just because there is nowhere for them to go. So what are their goals? Where do they want to be? And the third thing is we're trying to make a good match. Every workplace has a culture. Even if you work alone and you're hiring your very first employee, you have a work culture. You get up in the morning and you do certain things a certain way. You answer the phone a certain way. You have expectations for yourself. You have expectations for how you're going to deliver for your customers, how your suppliers are going to take care of you, and so forth. That extends to the next person you hire and the next person and the next person. So whatever your work culture is, you need to be able to wrap your arms around that and say, this is the way we get things done. And that's really what a work culture is. How do we do things around here? So if you can identify your work culture, you can find people who would be a good fit for that work culture. If you are an energetic, vibrant, happy person who can't wait to get up in the morning and get right to work, you probably don't want to hire the person who is kind of dragging through the first half of the day, can't get enough coffee, a little bit grumpy. Maybe after lunch things pick up. Maybe you can hire them to work after lunch, but they're certainly not going to be a good fit for your high energy in the beginning of the day. So you want to hire somebody who's going to be a good fit. There are 4 components to hiring right. One is we're going to define that job accurately, which means we're going to tell them these are our goals. This is what we want you to be able to do. We want to match up to your goals. And this is the kind of culture we have that is going to be a good match for you. Can you live with that? We want to be able to evaluate their resume fully, which means we're not going to be afraid to look for the hidden signs. There are a lot of hidden signals in resumes. We're going to ask effective questions, and we're going to keep score, and we're going to quantify the results. So here are the three things to consider. Do they have the skills? You know, you got a soccer player who's doing drills. If you play piano, now this is one of the reasons I quit playing piano in the 5th grade. My piano teacher would not let me just be Billy Joel. She kept making me play these stupid things called scales. She wanted me to just play these scales over and over and over. Well, I was never making the connection that if I can do these scales over and over and over, eventually it's going to build muscle memory. And someday I will be able to play like Billy Joel. Someday I'll be able to do that. I'll be able to play the music I love, and I could be the coolest person at the party. But no, I never caught on to that skill building until much later in life. And I realized it's the little things. So we want to know, are they doing the little things to build their skills? If we're going to get a good skill match, we want to know that we're hiring a person who is committed to growing their skills, doing the drills, doing the work. Is there a connection between their reality and their expectations? If our reality is not going to match up to, maybe they're looking for a place where they have a lot of corporate support, but we're a very small business, you know, and we've had people who have come to us from a corporate environment where they have a big safety net. There are a lot of people in that organization to call on. If you call out sick, there's somebody who's going to stand right in there in the gap and take over for you and take care of you. If you need an extra hand, they're going to be there. Versus a small business, and they may not be ready to just say, how do I get this done if it's only me? We've seen it the other way around, where people can go from a very small business environment where they're used to making a lot of decisions, having a lot of autonomy, and they move into a corporate environment where they don't have that. They have to ask permission to make decisions, or they have to run a decision by someone, or even run a decision by a committee to get approval. So are we matching these things up? Are we hiring somebody who is going to be a good fit? Or are they the odd duck? You know, we've got this orange crane here in a sea of blue cranes. Are they going to feel at home here? Are they going to feel welcomed here? Sequoia Fund is a native CDFI. We were born of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian tribal government. We were a revolving loan fund of the tribe. We started out as a community development fund, and we eventually spun off into our own entity. We're now a separate entity, and we're a nonprofit organization. But we are still very ingrained with tribal culture. We are still very much a part of tribal operations. We like to think of ourselves as being very critical to tribal success. And over the years, we've had people ask, whether it's our auditors, whether it's the Small Business Administration, whether it's the U.S. Treasury, and federal agencies do have rules. They have rules about how you can hire and how you shouldn't discriminate. And they ask us, do you have any discriminatory hiring practices? I'm very quick to say, absolutely, we do. We do discriminate, and we make no bones about it. We have native preference. All things being equal, we're going to hire an enrolled member, and they have to be okay with that. Now, what we can't do is we can't discriminate because of religious background, gender, sexual orientation, things like that. But when it comes down to, we are a native organization serving native communities and employing native people. So there's some wiggle room that we have here. I know that we have a Taro officer in here. Annette, I think, has joined us from Taro at the Dry Creek Rancheria. So yes, there are certain things certain criteria that we can place on, especially if we have tribal contracts and things like that. So we have to know where the lines are on the playing field. But when it comes right down to it, we're still taking these three things into consideration. We want to have a good fit so that they're going to be a long-lasting employee. They're going to want to hang around for a long time, and we're going to want them to hang around for a long time. So let's start with the job description. The job description is going to have three components to it. Very simply, we've got a list of need to haves, and we got a list of nice to haves, and we've got something that relates to the personality fit. Okay, so let's talk about the need to haves first. But before I do that, I want to talk about the graphic that I have up here. This graphic is sort of a newspaper ad. That's the job description that you put in the newspaper. The job description that you put in the newspaper is not the official job description. Okay, I want to be very clear about that. The job description that you're going to put in your ads, maybe on LinkedIn, maybe that you're going to use to recruit people, is not the job description. Your job description is designed to help you monitor and evaluate the success of that employee. Are they doing the job you need done? The one that you put in the newspaper is going to be a little less scary, but it is going to want to include things that could weed out people. You want people to self-regulate. All right. If you say in the ad that you will be traveling 70% of the time, that's going to weed out people who don't want to travel. All right. But you don't need to necessarily put in there things like how much, how deep they need to have an understanding of Microsoft products and things. You can just say, Microsoft experience. But yeah, that other duties as directed or other duties as assigned is really important. That's not something you're going to put in the job description that goes, in the newspaper. And I say newspaper because we have a local newspaper here that everybody reads it. We'd be crazy not to advertise in the newspaper around here. But we want to put we want to list the experience and the technical knowledge this person needs to have. Here's something I want to bring your attention to as well. There are a lot of times we will put things in the job description that seem like it should be there, but it's just totally meaningless. We put things in the job descriptions like must have 15 years experience in this field. Well, what if they have 15 really terrible years experience? What if they spent the last 15 years watching their back because everybody in the organization just wants them gone? They're toxic. Nobody can stand them. They don't do a great job, but they've been there forever. It's hard to get rid of them. Or maybe they do one thing in their job description really, really well, and they're terrible at the rest of it. But because they're so good at that one thing, nobody has the heart to let them go. Do you want that person, or would you rather have somebody who just had 2 phenomenal years of growth and experience and learning, and somebody who's excited to learn and take on new challenges and go to the next level? Well, for me, I would rather have someone who has fewer years of experience and opt for the person who has a greater hunger for experience. So on the need to have, we have to be very careful not to put things in there that seem like they should be there, but don't really need to be there. Do you really need 5 years experience? Now, you can always say, depending on the role, you need to have 5 to 10 years of increasingly responsible duties in this area. Show us that you've had some growth during that time, not that you walked in the door, you were stagnant for the last 5 to 10 years. And now you're looking for something that pays better. The nice to have, those are things like additional certifications, additional training. If you're hiring a welder and you want a specialty, you could say, 90% of your job is going to be in this, but we're going to show some preference to candidates that also have experience in this type of welding. Don't assume that people are overqualified. Based on the job description that you put out there in the world, you might have somebody who has a PhD in a certain area, and you might look at their resume and the first thing you see is PhD, and you say, oh no, PhD, you're not going to be happy here. You're going to be overqualified. That may not be the case. They may be looking for a slower pace of life. They may be getting closer to retirement. They want something different to do for the last 5 or 10 years of their career. They may actually be like a lot of people I've known who go out and they get that degree and they end up hating the field. I've known several people who went to law school, passed the bar, realized they hated the practice of law. They went into real estate. They went into business ownership. They did something else. So don't ever just assume that because what you see on the resume says, oh, I don't need that, that person is overqualified. The personality fit. If it's deemed crucial to the job performance, then we can evaluate their personality. We can evaluate whether this is going to be a good job fit, if it is critical to the work they're doing. So again, we have to be careful, but if somebody comes in the door and we need somebody who's just going to stare at a computer screen all day, maybe we need a number cruncher. We need somebody who is going to sit at that computer all day. We're going to be able to lock them in the room, feed them through a hole in the door, and they don't ever have to have human interaction. They're just going to sit there all day and crunch numbers. If that's what we need, then we are probably not going to be as turned on by the person who has a need to walk down the hall, talk to everybody, socialize. They may be great number crunchers, but it's not going to be a good fit because we're going to need them to sit in that box and get fed through a hole in the door, and they're going to want to go out and do other things. Okay? So look at what you need to have for the job. Look at what would be nice to have. At the end of the day, you're going to have to look at your candidates who actually show up. And you're going to have to make a decision. You're going to have to say, okay, I don't have anybody here with all the nice to haves. Do we have somebody with enough of the need to haves that we can live with that? Do we have a good fit, a good personality fit for this role? If that works, then maybe the extra certifications, the extra courses and so forth, maybe we don't need that. Or you can say, we don't have exactly what we're looking for. Let's wait. Now, that's a hard decision to make. When you talk about being in a position of decision-making authority, that's one of the hardest decisions you're going to have to make, because that means starting over. That means admitting that you didn't get the right people in the pipeline. Now, do you need to go back and tweak the job description? Do you need to tweak the ad that you placed out there to let people know about the job? Maybe you need to adjust your pay scale. What about it is not attracting the people you need to apply? So again, don't ever be afraid to say, wow, I'm not happy with any of these candidates. We're just going to start over. Once you get candidates to start sending you applications and resumes. Now, I'm going to say this. I encourage people to send you a resume because that tells you a little bit about themselves. That tells you what they think of themselves, what they believe about themselves that is worth telling. It gives you a little bit of their story. It also tells you a little bit about how they write. Can they put a sentence together? Can they structure this document so that it makes sense and you can follow it and see exactly the path of their career? Okay, you want that resume, and that's great, but you also need people to fill out a job application. We always encourage people to send us a resume. Okay, thank you. We've got your resume. Now complete this job application. And the applicants might say, well, wait a minute, I just sent you a resume. Why do you need this application? Because at this stage of the game, we are going to start to homogenize our data. We're going to start to bring everything into a template so that we're comparing apples to apples. That if someone sees a list of 3 or 4 candidates that we like and we say, which of these do you like best? They are not picking who has the flowery language. We're not picking who has the best hair, who dresses the best, who drives the best car. All they see is a homogenized application. It's the same. Everybody gets the same information. Everybody puts in the same information. That's going to help us make better decisions, safer decisions, so that we're not going to be accused of doing anything maybe that we shouldn't be doing. You want the resume because it tells a story, but you're going to want that application as well. So what are we going to be looking for in those two documents? And remember, let me go back here just a second. Let me show you this just to remind you, this is where we came from. See this big thing up here in the top left, this COVID, this changed some of this. So gaps in employment. We used to look at gaps in employment and say, oh, that's bad. You took a year off. Where were you for a year? Nowadays, that person might have a gap in their employment, but they have a great story. We might have a recent college graduate who has no job history from the time they graduated in May of last year through December of last year, or even today. And we say, wait a minute, what were you doing? And the first inclination, and remember, look at the picture, guys. Look at the picture. I've got some gray in my beard, so I'm going to tell on myself a little bit. My first inclination might be, you didn't have a job? What were you doing? I don't think I want to hire you. Okay, but I have to back up and say, tell me about this. They may perk up and have an amazing story about how they worked. They started a business in college. They saved all their money and they hiked around Europe and learned about things, or they took a trip to Africa and they did some volunteer work, or they just took a trip around America to see the sights and see old friends and see people. But they've got a story. Listen to that story. Now, the question then is, what did you learn in that gap? What did you learn? What did you take away from that? Maybe they learned some things. Maybe in that time, they did some odd jobs, or they did some things just to stay involved and keep working. They've learned some new skills that they can bring back. So that gap may not actually be a negative for them. We want to say, okay, tell us about the gap. We're gonna look at the missing must-haves. If we are looking at things that, I absolutely need skills with Microsoft Office. I don't see those here. Have you ever worked with? No, I'm a Mac person. I've always worked with Mac. Do you want to be the one to convert someone from a Mac operating system over to a Windows operating system? Again, if you're up for that, that might not be such a bad thing. But if they've never touched a computer, that's something altogether different. Do they have a skill fit, or is there no skill fit, or do they have outdated or stale skills? Now remember, COVID changed a lot of things. It caused a lot of people who were on the brink of retirement to just go ahead and pull the plug and say, I'm out of here. So we had a vast swath of older workers who were either past retirement age and still working because they loved it, or they were really close to retirement age and said, I think I'll hang on for another year or two. They just decided, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do this. And when you come back to work in 5, 6 years, maybe you decide I'm going to do something. Maybe I stopped working to have children. Okay. What skills did you retain? What did you hang on to? What are you going to need a little refresher on? Just because they have outdated or stale skills doesn't mean they have no skills. Tell me about the gap. What were you learning? Maybe I was learning some new tech skills. Maybe I started a blog. Maybe I started a website. Maybe I started this organization for new moms, or I started this organization for people who love to fish, whatever it is. Find out about that gap. If their skills are outdated or stale, maybe you can work with that. If there's no skill fit, it may be worth just moving on. And as much as you like this person, is it going to be worth it to try to educate them in that role? Maybe not. Now, the next one's a little trickier. Job hopping. Again, this is one of those that kind of creates this this air about somebody that maybe they can't hold a job. Why did you change jobs so many times in such a small amount of time? Again, we're not looking at the dates. Let's ask the question, why? I worked for this restaurant for 3 months and the place burned down. I had no choice but to leave. I worked for this other restaurant for a year and the owner retired and closed it. Or they sold it to a place that let everybody go. Let's ask the why. Let's not be so quick to just see rapid succession of jobs and say there's something wrong with this person. Maybe there was something wrong with their situation, and there's nothing there that would preclude them from having a job. Maybe they are hopping around to look for a home. Maybe they want a long-term, and that's a conversation that we need to have with applicants. You've never had a job for longer than X. Yeah. Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Do you see yourself working here in 5 years? And tell me why. Help me understand how I can believe that when I've seen all this movement. And there might be a good reason. Maybe, maybe that person moved around because their spouse was in the military. Maybe that person moved around for a lot of reasons that are not showing up in black and white on that resume. So let's talk about that. And yeah, Annette, when we talk about transferable skills, my mother was a bank teller before I was born. And she worked a variety of jobs as I was growing up. And but every one of those jobs required somebody who was good with money, trustworthy, highly organized, and could work fast, because not only was she a bank teller, she was a drive-through teller. In the days when drive-throughs actually moved pretty fast. So we start to look for those transferable skills and say, how can we plug those in? Maybe you've got all the other stuff. Let's transfer those skills over here, and we've got a good fit. Now, you're going to have three markings, six markings that you're going to put on resumes and applications. And I'm going to go through these markings with you. This is going to help you as you're evaluating these markings. Okay, you're going to create 3 piles. You're going to create a yes, no, and a maybe pile. The yeses are easy. They are people they've hit the mark. They have the skills. You haven't really tested that personality fit, that culture fit yet, but you believe that based on what you're seeing on paper, they would probably do a good job here. That's easy. The no's will be fairly easy. The no's will be don't have the skill sets, the basic skill sets you're looking for. Maybe they've listed a reason for job hopping or gaps that don't fit with the way you do business or the way you operate your organization. And maybe you just realize that's not going to be, they didn't take 6 months off to take care of their mother who had cancer. They took 6 months off because they needed to catch up on all the Law and Order episodes they missed or something. So those are easy. The maybes are hard. Now, the maybes could go either way, but you might need a precursor telephone interview with these folks. And it's okay to say, hey, look, we're kind of on the fence. We're thinking that maybe you could work, and we may be worth bringing in for an interview. Could we talk about this on the phone a little bit? And let me ask you some questions. And, maybe you start asking about the gaps in employment. Maybe you start asking about some of those missing skills. I see that you don't really have this. You did this work, but you don't really list this skill. Is there a reason maybe that you didn't list that skill along with this job? Or tell me about why you have 5 jobs in the last year. Okay. If they answer those questions satisfactorily, move them into the yes pile. If they don't, they go into the no pile. Thank you very much. You're going to have 3 markings. Yeah, and Jeff, how they fill out the application is a good insight. Yeah, if they're thorough, that's a good sign. But we've had people who are just very vague, don't want to give you, dates for their job. Their last job was that they were employed from 2019 to 2022. All right. Were they employed for 3 years, or were they employed for 2 years and 2 months? Did they come in December 2019 and leave in January of 2022? What does that mean? That's where these last markings come from. You've got FT, which means from and to. If they're vague, and again, if this is pretty clear that you're just not turned on by their answers, it's a no. Don't worry about this. But for these maybes, even for some of the yeses, you might say FT. On their dates, that stands for from and to. Now, that could mean more than just dates. Let's say somebody gives you an application or a resume that says, I increased sales by 170% at my last job, or I increased sales by 700% at my last job. Okay, from, to. If you increase sales from $1 to $1.70, that's not really impressive. But if you increase sales from a million to 70 million, that's pretty impressive. So we start to look at from and to on dates, on anything that we say, okay, where did this start and where does this end? We're going to use the term define. A lot of people use jargon. Jargon's fine as long as they explain what it is, but I always prefer people write me a resume like they assume I know nothing, which 90% of the time is the case. But I'm going to use that word define. I'm going to say define that. What do you mean by that? Tell me that. And then we WDTM. What does this mean? Define says you've got a term here that I don't understand. You've got a sentence here that says something about your work that I'm not quite connecting with. I don't get that. Tell me what that is. Define that for me. What does this mean? Could be something like I increased happiness quotients at my old job by 30%. What does that even mean? Did you do a weekly survey to gauge happiness, and how did you do that? Some people will say wrote a report or designed a policy doing this. Okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? If you wrote a report or if you designed a policy, if you made a change, if you created a company, did you create that company policy, or did you just type it up for the boss who actually created it? Or did you use ChatGPT to create it? What does this mean? When you say you wrote a company handbook, did you actually write that company handbook? Or did you cannibalize it from another organization and adopt it for yourself? Because writing a handbook and adapting a handbook to your own organization is two different things. WDTM, define, and from and to are going to tell you how honest this person is being with you. How forthright are they being with you? So you're going to go through those. You're going to stack them up. Yes, no, maybe. Let me just say that when you've got that resume in front of you, it is not a valuable piece of art. They have given it to you on paper, not on the back of the Mona Lisa. Write all over that thing. Make notes. You need to carve out a minimum of 15 minutes to review each resume. Now, it may not take that long, but be prepared. You may find some of those hidden nuggets in there. You may find, oh, they've put this. What does this mean? Maybe this is something I want to dig into. Make some notes. Again, if you see a resume that's very sketchy, doesn't have a lot of information on it, or maybe it was just written for the wrong industry. You're trying to hire a bus driver for Tribal Transit, and they've given you a resume for data programmer. Do they really want to drive a bus, or do they think they sent this resume to somebody else? Make some notes. Give yourself some time. You're going to scan for disqualifiers. You're going to scan for those disqualifiers, like we just talked about. They're not as much disqualifiers as they used to be. We can't be so quick to just call them disqualifiers, but they may be, and we're gonna make notes about those. Okay, and you're going to hang on to all of the resumes for a while. Even if you don't hire those people, you want to hang on to those resumes. And there's a reason for that. I'll go over that in just a moment. But then we're going to move on to the interview. All right. Now, I'm not going to get into my interview process as much because I actually take 2 hours. I schedule 2 hours for an initial interview, not the phone interview. The phone interview is, I want to talk to you. I want to see, can you put 2 sentences together? Can you talk to me like a professional? How do you sound over the phone? How do you look through that phone? Can I see our customers talking to you? Can I see our constituents talking to you? Can I see you talking to other people in our organization? What's your demeanor? What's your attitude like? Do you sound like you just rolled out of bed, maybe a little groggy? Are you upset that you just spilled coffee all over yourself and you're not really in the mood to talk? Or are you kind of happy to be talking to a prospective employer? Let's have that initial conversation. And if we feel good about that, we're not really going to go deep. but we're going to say, look, here's the process. Are you okay with this? Does this work for you? We're going to try to meet on next Tuesday or Wednesday. If one of those days works for you, I'm going to send you a meeting invitation and we'll have you come by the office. Lay out the process in that phone interview. If it feels good to you, go ahead and schedule that in-person interview. You want to schedule at least 2 hours. Why do you want to schedule 2 hours? Don't you just know? Don't we just, when we see somebody, when we first meet somebody, don't we just have that feeling? Well, yes and no. Most people we hire, if they're good, they're going to be around for a long time. They're going to be in a relationship with us, their coworkers, with the organization, with our customers, our suppliers. That's a long-term relationship. And yet we hire people like a drunk guy in a bar who says, hey, baby, you look pretty good. Want to get married. If you remember that Alan Jackson song, I'm married to a waitress and don't even know her name, that looks a lot like the way small organizations hire people. I'm married to a waitress, don't even know her name. So let's plan to take time, because if you get into a conversation and you want to dig deep, it's probably going to take somebody a good 30 minutes to an hour to come out of their shell, to get comfortable with you, to loosen up and start talking to you. They're never going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly from the word go. You're going to have to ease them into it so that they feel comfortable telling you about themselves. And the reason I say that, and I'm going to use a bad word here, and I just, we're all grown-ups here, but I'm going to give you a direct quote. We had a team interview for an administrative assistant years ago. This was before my days at Sequoia Fund. We scheduled a 2-hour interview. After about the first 30 minutes of questioning, you start to see this person loosen up. Things are going well. She's answering. And about an hour and a half into this, we're looking at each other going, yeah, she's the one. This is it. We're all in love. Let's make the deal right now. Let's hire her right now. But we still had a few questions. And one of the questions that we ask toward the end of the interview process, one of my favorites was always, tell me about a time when you got angry in the workplace. And she thought about it for a second. She said, well, there was this one time when a coworker stole my sandwich out of the refrigerator at lunch. And I knew it was her. I knew she had done it. And I said, well, how did that make you feel? She said, oh, I was not happy. I wasn't happy at all about it. And then I asked, well, what did you do about that? And she said, I keyed that bitch's car. Oh, whoa, what? The interview came to a screeching halt. It took that long for her to start to reveal herself to us. So let's go through some do's and don'ts so that you can get to the place where you get that kind of brutal honesty, that openness that's going to give you the information you need to make a good hiring decision. Number one, you want to manipulate your hiring environment. Now, what do I mean by that? You want to set up a comfortable environment where people are going to be comfortable to sit. They're not going to feel intimidated, and they're going to be willing to talk to you about things. I kind of like the idea of putting a table in between you. And if there's not a place where you can have a table in between you and the candidate, offer them a water, offer them a Coke, offer them something. And here's why. That table represents a physical barrier between you and me. And it protects me. If I say something wrong, if I give you a bad answer, if I tell you something you didn't want to hear, or maybe something else happens in that interview that I can't believe that came out of my mouth. That table protects me. And so that table becomes part of that environment, but so does that can of Coke, or so does that bottle of water, because I can hold on to that. And as a candidate, that becomes the barrier between you and me. And that loosens me up a little bit, because now I feel protected. I'm not as afraid to answer your questions because I've got this bottle of water. So we're going to manipulate that physical, tangible environment, but we're also going to manipulate the emotional environment. We're going to set a very casual tone. We're not going to walk in with, you've probably seen the old movies with a detective in a dark room shines the light in somebody's face and says, spill the beans, tell me all of it. You're going to confess before you walk out of here, kind of thing. No, for a lot of people, that's the kind of job interview they've been in, and that's what they're used to. So we're going to set a comfortable tone. We're going to be welcoming as they walk in the door. Hey, we got a lot of important things to talk about here. Do you mind if I take notes? Now, that's an important question, because that sets the intangible environment for the candidate. You're going to take notes. You want to encourage them to take notes. But by asking, do you mind if I take notes? That kind of gives them some control very early on. And it lets them think, okay, this is not just this person throwing questions at me. I'm giving them permission to take notes. They may not even think about it in a conscious way, but it gives them a modicum of control. All right. And then we need to set a positive environment so that we can get the answers to the questions we need. We do want to start on time. If we have somebody who's 15 minutes late to an interview, 30 minutes late to an interview, forgot the day, that's a pretty bad sign. I've had people walk in 15 minutes late for an interview, and I've sent them back home. Hey, no need. We've talked 3 times, and you got an email about the time, and you didn't show up. And they say, well, I ran into traffic. I'm going to tell you like my dad used to tell me when I was late. Leave earlier. We want to ask permission to use their first name. Now, that sounds silly, but again, we're giving them control. Tell them what they can call you. You don't have to call me Mr. Siegel. Please call me Russ. The neutral environment works. You don't want to do interviews in your personal office. If they start looking around and seeing your personal effects, they know that they're in your domain. You're going to win whatever conversation is happening there. We don't want to show quick judgments. We don't want to formulate a 30-second judgment and just all of a sudden our face says, nope, you're not the one. We don't want to make assumptions. We don't want to assume that those gaps are bad. We don't want to interview from a position of power. Make your seat adjustable so that you match their eye level. If you're up above them, that's a position of power. If you're down below them, you're giving them, make it as equal as you can so that you're on a peer-to-peer even plane. Don't waste their time asking inane questions like, did you find our staircase too steep when you arrived? How was our parking garage? No. Don't talk about the weather. It's okay to say, hey, we have a lot of important things to go over today. I want to jump right in. Is it okay if I take some notes? Here's a notebook if you'd like to take some notes if they didn't bring one of their own. And don't fail to take notes because notes are important. Don't dominate the conversation. This is about learning from each other. There are 3 types of questions, and I've actually just modeled those 3 types of questions for you. One is an open-ended question. You can ask yes or no questions. That's fine, but you're going to get a yes or no answer, and that's not really going to get you very far. But an open-ended question would be, tell me about a time when, or can you describe your experience with? And when I say tell me about a time when, I'm asking about historical information. I'm not asking them to come up with a hypothetical. Tell me what you might do if you ran across no. Tell me about a time when you did this thing or experienced this thing. Closed-end questions could be something like, your resume says that you worked at this location from this date to this date. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, that's a closed-end question, but you have a purpose there. You can ask a negative inquiry question. A negative inquiry question just says, I've always believed it's better to go ahead and ship an incorrect order instead of incurring back orders. What do you feel is best? Now, they may say, oh, wow, I believe in doing things right. I'm not going to ship it till it's perfect. You're not necessarily looking for a right or wrong answer. You want to know, are you producing stress? Can you force them to answer a question that they might think their answer is going to be different from yours? And how do they formulate that answer? You can ask them a positive inquiry question. Would you say that customer satisfaction or profitability is most important? Well, unhappy customers don't give us much profit. But if we don't make a profit, we can't keep our customers happy. You're just looking to see how they formulate that question, that answer. And you can ask a confirming question. So just to confirm, you're telling me that you would reprimand an employee with a written warning first rather than a verbal warning. Sometimes that question cuts off rambling. If they're just talking and talking and talking, you can say, let me clarify something here. You want to get enough information and you want to get the right information. So here are some minefields that we want to avoid. Again, native hiring preference, sure, you're clear on that. But you don't need to be asking about age. And I'm a little uncomfortable. I get resumes that have people's age, that has their marital status, even some that have their religion on there. I don't need to know that you're Southern Baptist. That's not part of this interview process. So age, religion, marital and family status is not really important. And what's important is, can you travel? I'm not going to ask somebody, how many kids do you have? Because that's going to tell me, no, you can't ever leave home. No, can you travel? That's all I need to ask. We're not going to ask about gender, health, or physical abilities. Wow. Oh, goodness. That's pretty serious. You may not be with us in a year. I don't know if I want to hire you. Nope. Can't go there. You don't need to ask about transportation. Do you own a car? You can ask, do you have reliable transportation to get to work? But you can't ask if they own a car. We have laws that protect job applicants as well as those who work for us. We have Fair Pay Acts, we have the Paycheck Fairness Act, we have the Equal Remedies Act, we have the Healthy Families Act. We have a lot of things that help us. So I'm just going to direct you to the U.S. Department of Labor to look at some of those umbrella type laws. Now, your tribe, if you're off reservation, you may have state laws that prevail. So I would just encourage you, look at whatever laws govern your hiring and see where are the minefields you need to stay out of, because you don't want to get in trouble asking the wrong questions. What's my biggest red flag in the hiring process? My biggest red flag in the hiring process is a bad culture fit. I can teach skills. I can't teach people to be nice. I can't teach people to get along. And if in this interview process, we're finding out that this person is maybe argumentative, or they're itching for a fight, or they're obtuse, they're never really going to answer the question. They're always going to find a way to just try to get under our skin. And we've had people who do that. That's probably going to be a real quick turnoff for me. I'm not going to be able to judge that on paper. But that's a personality issue that we know is not going to be a good fit with us. Cherokee culture is we like sarcasm. We like humor. And if somebody doesn't get, if we throw a little bit of sarcasm out there in the interview process as we're kind of going through, and we make it obvious that it's sarcasm, and that person doesn't get it, are they going to be at home here? Or are they going to feel like everybody's out to get them? And people are saying things that I don't understand. That could be an issue. So yeah, we want to. That's mine. Now you may have other red flags. You may have a skill set that is an absolute red flag. If they're missing this, it's a no. Can't do it. So again, that's kind of subjective. It's up to you. Let's do the investigative work. We're kind of running low on time. We got about 12 minutes, but we got time. We can do this. The questions that I asked earlier. Remember, I said I've already modeled these questions for you. I gave you a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary question. Most interviewers only ask the primary question. Tell me about a time when you got angry in the workplace. And they're going to give you a story and you're going to move on. But what does that story tell you? Nothing. It doesn't really tell you anything. The primary question tees up the secondary question. Tell me about a time when you got angry in the workplace, or tell me about a time you faced a challenge, a new challenge. Sometimes freezing and doing nothing is the right answer. Sometimes, hey, I didn't do anything. I let those two people work out their differences. I told them that they needed to sit in a room and work this out, and they did. Sometimes doing nothing is doing something. But again, we want to ask those questions. Let's dig down. This is called domino questioning. Once we've found somebody who we think is a good fit, we've gone through a 2-hour interview, we've done our work, we want to start making calls. And we want to make calls to say, we think this is going to go places. Let's have another talk. And then you want to schedule a follow-up interview, and it does not need to be with you. Your follow-up interviews need to be with either their direct reports or the people they will be reporting to or their teammates. You want them to be in a team environment. It might also help to take that person off site. Have a job interview over lunch. Have a job interview over donuts and coffee at Dunkin' Donuts or something like that, or Starbucks. Go somewhere where you can be in an unwork environment. Why do you want to do that? Well, we've had interviews where we've gotten to a certain point where everybody's thinking this is the person. We really like this person. We go to a restaurant and that person just it goes from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde in an instant. And they turned on the wait staff and got nasty. We ended the interview at that point. This person realized she had messed up, but she revealed her true self in that team environment where she was relaxed and she felt like it was okay to just rake this waiter over the coals. And that was not cool. So again, we're going to use these domino questions to get to the answers we're looking for. Then we want to audition. Okay, if any of you are Star Trek fans, you know that there was this little thing called the Kobayashi Maru. It was the unwinnable test. It was the it was the unconquerable challenge that all new Starfleet officers had to go through. And James T. Kirk, our intrepid captain, cheated. He cheated. He reprogrammed the test. And this is one of those early things that we learned very early on about his career, is that he actually progressed because he beat the test. And he was the only person to ever beat the test because he cheated. But he proved himself. All right. If we are hiring somebody to work in the kitchen, do we want to just take their word for it that they know how to make pasta? Do we want to take their word for it that they can handle a high pressure environment? Or do we want to put them in that environment and let them audition? If we have somebody who says, I'm an experienced sous chef, hey, let's put them in a kitchen and see how they do. If they completely fall apart in our environment, it's probably best for both of us that they don't hang around. But if they thrive and they realize that, we say, this is the person who's going to be able to work here with us, that audition has borne fruit, and that's who we want. Don't just take people's word for it. If I want to learn how to ski, I don't want a ski instructor who learned from reading ski magazines and books and watching YouTube videos. I want to learn from somebody who's spent a lot of time on the slopes. Same thing with anything else. Let's make sure they know what they're doing. Making the offer. We want to put that offer in writing. Put it in writing. We're going to outline the job description. We're going to give them a desired start date. We're going to tell them what their pay is going to be. What are the benefits? How much vacation time are they going to get? What does their retirement package look like? What is their title going to be, and who are they going to report to? No surprises. In fact, if you interview, and you can have as many interviews as you want, you can have a couple of follow-on interviews with people. And you can tell people, look, we're taking a long time to do this because we're very serious about it, and we want you to be too. And we want this to be good for everybody. But by the time you start to put all this on paper, there really shouldn't be any surprises. If they interview thinking they're going to make $90,000 a year, and you hand them a job offer that says $50,000 a year, that's not a good look. If they ask you, what is the pay range for this job? Go ahead and tell them. There shouldn't be any secrets. People make assumptions anyway. But you need to put a response deadline on there. We need to hear about it. We're going to give you 3 days. We're going to give you 1 week to make this decision. We can't let you, we've come this far. We're not going to give you 6 months to make this decision. And that date, that pay, that benefits package, you can make that non-negotiable. Now, I say that with a little caveat. We have had instances where we've said, look, the pay's non-negotiable, but what we'll do is we're not going to make you start over on your vacation accruals. If you're accruing this much time on this job, when you come over here, that's where we're going to start you. We're going to start you with that accrual. Okay. So you're not going to budge on the pay, but I'm not really going to have to go back to the very beginning of my career in building vacation time. Oh, okay. That's a negotiable. You have the ability to do that or something like that. So you can say it's non-negotiable, but if you have some wiggle room, it might be to your benefit to use that. Don't settle, though. Don't just hire somebody because it's the best candidate you have at the moment. always be willing to go back and re-interview, start the process over, and have a few backup choices. Even if you only have one, your primary candidate says, I just took a job this morning, I just accepted a position this morning. Thank you so much for the offer. You've got somebody else you can call. That's a good position to be in. Now, by no candidate left behind, what I mean is, remember I said you're going to keep all those resumes, all those applications, even the ones that you said no to. They're in the no stack, right? You're going to hang on to those because you want to send them a nice letter, an email, or even make a phone call. Don't ghost people. Don't leave them hanging. Contact them and say, look, we really appreciate you applying. We don't think there's a good fit right now, but in the future, we think maybe there's an opportunity for you to reapply. We encourage you to reapply at any opportunity you have with our organization. Even if you know they're a rotten candidate, things can always change. They could go from being rotten today to being stellar in 2 or 3 years. Leave the door open. In our case, one of the reasons we don't want to ghost people is that they may not be a job candidate for us today, but they may be a customer for us tomorrow. And we don't want any bad blood between us and people who might need a loan. We want them to feel good about us. We want them to see us as professional and up, right? Now, how do we become employers of choice? And this is what we're going to spend the last few minutes on. Remember, everybody got a letter or an email or a call. We're going to thank them for their interest. We're going to acknowledge their experience. We're going to let them know that, hey, this was a very competitive field. You didn't make the cut, but it's not the end of the world. All of that starts to build our reputation as an employer because people talk. When that person talks to someone else in the future who says, I'm thinking about applying for a job at Sequoia Fund, we don't want that person saying, wait a minute, I applied for a job there. They ghosted me. They never talked to me, or they were nasty and they just didn't want me. I don't think you ought to apply there, or I don't think you ought to get a loan there. What we want them to do is say, you know what, I didn't get a job there, but they were very professional, very cordial. I think it'd still be a good place to work. We want to create an environment where people are happy. Remember, happy encompasses a lot of things. Doesn't mean that people are running around with balloons all day long and laser light parades. It means that we're productive. We feel good about the work that we do. We feel appreciated. And there's an alignment with my core values and the organization's core values. I feel good about coming to work here every day. And if I feel good about coming to work here every day, I'm going to carry that attitude to the grocery store. I'm going to carry that attitude to church. I'm going to carry that attitude to the doctor's office or the hospital, or while I'm getting my oil changed or anything else like that. And so word starts to get out that you're an organization that keeps its word, that treats people well, that does amazing things. If you do good work and you treat your people well right now, you will start to become a magnet, and you will start to create a gravitational field that actually pulls good candidates to you, so that you're not out there having to stand out in the parking lot with a bullhorn yelling for people to come and apply. You're going to have candidates start to gravitate toward you, and that makes you an employer of choice. At Sequoia Fund, we compete with the tribe, we compete with the casino, we compete with a lot of other organizations that pay well, treat their people well. And I want us to be the standard bearer that says, if you're going to work for an employer of excellence and you want to be excellent, then this is the place for you. We create that atmosphere, we attract those employees. If there's something that I can help you with along this journey as you are working on your job descriptions, your hiring process, anything else that you need to do, if you just want to reach out to me, please feel free to reach out to me. You have my LinkedIn connection down there in the web links. You've got my phone number now. And Brooke, I'm getting ready to turn it back over to you, but Brooke knows, everybody at the Native Learning Center knows. I mean, you can always reach out to me. I'm not gonna charge anything for a quick consultation to talk with you, to help you out. All you got to do is say, Russ, I was in your webinar. I need you to look over something or give me some feedback. More than happy to do that for you. Folks, I know that you could have spent the last hour and a half doing almost anything, and I'm honored that you would spend it with me. I'm going to turn it back over to Brooke. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for all your time and effort with this presentation, Russ. I know everybody learned a lot. I did go ahead and launch the webinar feedback survey just now for y'all. If you could take a moment to complete that, it takes maybe a minute or two to go through, and the feedback really helps us to know more of what's working well, what we can improve upon further. And it is an anonymous survey, so feel free to be as candid as you would like. We do share that feedback with Russ as well. Yes, I can, Bessie. If you would please put your email into the chat, Bessie, and I can follow up after the webinar and I can send you that item. That's not a problem at all. We hope you guys can join us for our next webinar. That is going to be another one with Russ. This will be next week, navigating the new teen workforce with your native business. As always, registration is free. You can catch that 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, or 10 a.m. if you are in the Alaska time zone. Feel free to access this and any other recorded webinars online at our website, nativelearningcenter.com. We have a Catheta webinars section, and if you open that up, there is a whole tab with all of our recorded webinars that go back for about 2 years. So feel free to view those, share them with your colleagues, share them with your friends. And please also check out our upcoming events posted to our various social media. You could find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have an in-house produced podcast titled the Hopathanga Native American Podcast, where we discuss more focused topics within Native American housing and self-determination. You can listen on Simplecast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you're somebody who prefers to watch the videos with our guests, then you can catch that on our YouTube. All right, folks. Once again, I want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. Thank you again, Russ, for an amazing presentation. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the day, and we hope to connect with all of you real soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Have a great day, everybody.